Right, welcome everybody to this Zoom meeting with Finney7. We have Richard Lambert and Steph Dale from Finney7 who will be available to answer questions. If you'd like to pose a question, given that there are a reasonable number of us, please use the chat facility that you will find at the bottom of the screen. And you will be able to enter a chat message, which I will pick up, and then I will find a suitable time to interrupt either Richard or Steph and ask them that question. Right, if I can then pass on to Richard or Steph, whichever one of you would like to begin, please.
I'll leave Steph to begin, he's always better.
Right, so I suggest that we start in the traditional form of introducing ourselves. So I'm Steph Dale. My role in Finney7 is primarily associated with doing productionisation work. So when we took on the original range of kits, it was my job to make sure that they went into production as easily as possible. It also means it's my role to work with the other members of the team who are designing the current generation of kits, and I work with them to bring those into production. In terms of my own interests, London South Western locos primarily, I'm also doing design work for a number of other London South Western locos to bring forward. And in terms of my personal interest, the lockdown period has meant that I've been able to get back to doing some of my German HO modelling in some of the time that I've had available at home. So happy to answer any questions that are related to the kits, the timescales, the sorts of things that we're looking at. The thing that we'll necessarily be quite cautious of is answering anything that we think is a competitive advantage, but I won't be offended if you ask. Richard?
My role is primarily the person who deals with the general public via email queries, phone. I'm responsible for making sure the orders are processed, go out, and deal with any queries that may arise, any missing bits, to make sure you all get what you want. For my own personal interest within the Finney7 range, I'm primarily an LMS fan and BR fan, which limits me to the Duchess. But under Steph's influence, I seem to be having a growing affliction for the LSWR range. And he and I talk quite a lot about the development of the LSWR side. And I found myself doing quite a few commissions for LSWR locos, which has been really interesting. Over the lockdown period, I've actually been doing some live stream narrow gauge just for a bit of fun and to do something different. So now we seem to be getting more out of that and more getting towards getting the rest of the range out. It's back on Finney7.
I have a question for whoever'd like to answer it. Can someone give, this is from Ian Gould, can someone give an update on the timescales for the release of the B1, please?
Yes.
Good answer, yes.
Right, so very, very happy to talk about the B1. Where we are with that at the moment is we've got tooling is in process at the moment. So it's months away is probably the best way of putting it. We've got a few steps left to go. So we've got to get production casting signed off. We have to get the final etch work signed off. And we've then got to end up in the situation where we've got a configured saleable build so that we can do the instructions. Those things can't be done in parallel. And so the timescales, I am not 100% clear on at the moment because it depends upon progress at each of those stages. I certainly am comfortable in saying that it will be out this year. Is that diplomatic enough, Richard?
Yeah, I think so. It's one of those things that if everything goes swimmingly, it can be done relatively quickly, but things don't have a habit of going swimmingly, and certainly not in lockdown. So the last thing we want to do is going to say it's going to be out at a specific date and then suddenly find we missed that. But it is, we have been doing a lot of work on it. Lockdown has not stopped that. And we've been working out what processes we want to use to get all the castings out. So it's very much light at the end of the tunnel and a final push for the home run. But as Steph says, we still have to get the production castings. We have then to do a test build. We have to write the instructions. And there's a defined order for doing that, so it can't be done at the same time. So it is going to be months rather than weeks, but not years.
I'll also add to that. Thanks for the thumbs up, Ian. I'll also add to that by saying that the 9400 is probably in much the same situation. We've got the first of the production parts back on the 9400, which is a really good step. But there's still the same process to go through with the 9400. And again, I'm suspecting that will be done and dusted by the end of the year, but again, can't predict exactly when. And our priority, my priority at the moment, is primarily associated with making sure that we can do the remains of the heavy lifting on the Great Western reintroductions, which I'm sure is a topic which will be close to many people's hearts.
I have a question from Kenneth Chitty. Good morning. Do you have any plans to introduce a range of wheels to match each kit?
No.
It's a very, very common question. It's something that would be interesting to do. The challenge that we have got, as you will no doubt realise, is that we are almost 100% reliant upon contract manufacturing. If we were to introduce a range of wheels of our own, we would almost certainly do it in partnership with organisations which are already producing wheels. I think the risk going to general industry for supply of something as specialised as a model railway wheel would not be a great success. But if we were happened to come across in our industry searches an organisation which I felt could do it, I think I would explore it with them. But it's not anything that we're planning on doing.
I have another question from Ian Gould. Given that you are looking to increase the London and South Western Railway stables of locomotives, what about a BT well tank?
That's a good question. So you're not the first person to ask. The challenge that we've got with the BT well tank is it's a class of unique locos. Each one was different. They changed so much through their life. I could not credibly produce a kit that allowed the majority of the class to be produced, and also the last three that survived. So I think it's probably a no. The other thing is, I think working on the list that Richard and I were going through of London South Western locos that would be ahead of the BT well tank, I think I had to leap to was it 104 in order to actually get them all done. It's possible, but it's not likely.
Did the London South Western Railway actually have 104 locos?
No, and I'm not expecting that I'll have 104 lives.
Right, a question from Raymond Kuhl. Please, can you provide me with a Great Western Railway Castle class front bogie kit? This would then enable me to complete my castle.
That's an interesting question because we don't do a castle.
Perhaps Raymond could expand on that one. Do you? Where did this castle class come from, Raymond?
Is it the same as one, for example, for a hall? We know.
Yeah. I thought ages ago you specialised in GWR stuff. When you were Martin Finney, you did a lot of GWR class engines, didn't you?
Yeah. If it's a standard bogey, it's something that we can look at. The challenge that we have with providing small items like that is that, of course, they're part of a large threat. Richard, do you want to quickly talk through the bespoke ordering process? Is anybody interested?
Yeah, the first thing is that Martin never did a castle. Malcolm Mitchell did, Martin didn't. So we don't have a castle in the range. I don't know whether the castle bogey is identical to the hall bogey or not. If it is, there's a possibility that we might be able to provide one. As Steph said, the problem is that that bogey will be part of a complete etch. Worse than that, it might just be possible that it's spread over 2 complete etches. And we can only buy complete etches. We can't buy part of an etch, which means that if you want an etch from us, we have to sell you a full etch, and that is very expensive. If we have to sell you 2 for a castle bogey, that is prohibitive. If it is the same as the hall, then it is just possible we may have a spare etch. Sometimes the etching process doesn't quite work and we have to reject an etch, but they might be good enough, that bit might be good enough for suitable resale and improvement. It's also possible that somebody has gone drastically wrong in a kit and we've had to send them some bits and pieces, and that has left the hall bogey as a spare. So all I can suggest is that you email me with your requirements. If you're satisfied that the hall and castle are identical, email me with your requirements and I can see whether we have a spare set amongst our spare etches, but there can be no promises on that.
Okay, thank you very much.
I would suggest as well that if, as Malcolm Mitchell has produced a castle kit in the past, and I think that is correct, isn't it, Richard?
It is.
Yeah, that perhaps MM1 might be a route to try and obtain some parts.
Indeed.
Okay, don't have any further questions at the moment. Are you in a position, you two, to explain, if you have some new things coming out in the next 12 months and what they might be?
We can go through where we are, because we've been working very hard on getting the Great Western range out. That's not been without its difficulties in lockdown, but we're at the stage now where every one of the Great Western locos is out, with exception of the 28XX and the Aberdare, both of which we're producing new chassis for. So apart from that, the rest of the range is now out, and that's been something that's only been finalised in the last month or so. There are just a couple of castings that we're having redone, so we're currently shipping with just a few bits missing, but they're final detailing bits, and we're providing them just as soon as we get hold of them. Following on from that, the 2 locos that are going to be coming out this year are the B1 and the 94XX. There are others that are being thought about or have been partly worked up, but those are the only two that we're confident in saying they are going to appear very shortly. As an aside, it's taken an awful lot longer than we thought to be able to get all of the Great Western Range out. And there's been a lot of work behind the scenes that hasn't necessarily been visible to the general public, particularly in the absence of exhibitions to explain what was going on. So for all those of you who've been waiting for bits, we can only apologise and say we've been working as hard as we can, but that they will definitely appear and should be appearing within the next month.
I have a question here from Simon Stanford. He says, I have seen or heard that it is possible to order frets in nickel silver rather than brass. Is this correct? And if so, what is the lead time?
That is entirely correct. There's a premium of 10% on the kit cost to reflect the extra cost of the nickel silver etches. And the lead time is, well, in normal circumstances, they say about 8 weeks, but these aren't necessarily normal circumstances. But you know, a couple of months, maybe 2.5 months should see that through. And as an aside, we've already ordered a number of route standard tenders to be in nickel silver to match the B1 kit.
Thank you for that. A question from Steph Godin. Do you provide advice on recommended motor and gearbox choices?
Yeah.
I'll leave Steph to answer that one.
So we have in the instructions we have recommendations for motor and gearboxes. The instructions, of course, are downloadable from the website that would allow you to see what they were. We're also, as you are probably aware, producing our own gearboxes. And in many cases, because of the sort of size of the loco that we do and the motors and gearbox combinations that we can offer, we suggest one of our own, but we're also very comfortable providing a recommendation, for example, for ABC motor gearbox, if that's your preference. So we usually can provide advice on that. Similarly, we can usually provide advice on what wheels we would recommend to use with a particular kit.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? I don't have any on the list at the moment. Can I pass it on to Steph to talk about something interesting? What about the 94XX? Can you show me some of the parts? Or I saw Richard hold up a cast boiler a second ago. Do we want to?
I'll take this one.
Yeah, go on, Richard. I think it's a fair thing to show people what that is.
This is off the production run of the boiler, firebox, smoke box tanks. The idea being that we can provide this kit to somebody who's done none or very little in the way of kit building, and they would then be able to produce a high quality model without the efforts or swear words in forming what is a complex shape here from brass. So that's got all the boiler bands on, plates on top of the firebox, it's all riveted, and is essentially going to be screwed to the chassis and the cab front. Similarly, the smokebox saddle and the upper rear bunker with all the complex shapes is also formed in resin. So there's only, as far as I can work out, from a beginner's point of view, most of it is going to be soldering pretty flat, straight bits, with the exception of splasher tops and round the top of the cab roof and the sides of the top of the cab. Other than that, there's a lot of gluing of high quality components to the resin castings. So while the chassis is more conventional, though we have put in things to make it easier, which Steph might pick up on a bit later, we've tried to make it as easy as possible for somebody relatively new to produce a pretty high quality model. And I'll just say on this casting, we've gone through a few iterations with this. to make sure that it's weighted, because there's a hole through it for things like DCC speaker and the like. So not a lot of space for added weight. So this in fact comes in at 324 grams, which is excellent, because it means you can just build it without thinking about putting any extra weight in. So we're trying as hard as we can to make that as easy as possible to build. And if Steph wants to pick up on some of the innovations on the chassis that we've been working on.
Yeah, sure. One of the things I can do, Richard, is I've just grabbed a photo off our drive of that casting. So cross your fingers, I'll do a quick screen share to show you guys what that's looking like at the moment. So this is the same casting that Richard was waving around a few moments ago. Can you see that okay, James?
Yeah, we can.
Good. So you can see that you've got all the detail in there. As Richard was saying, it's ballasted in order to make sure that it hits the right weight. It also helps us with some stability in the shape, because it's not a self-supporting shape. So that's an example of where we are with these mouldings. I now have to work out how to turn off my screen share.
It's at the top of your screen, Steph.
There.
Yeah, if you push your mouse to the top, something will pop down. You've got stop sharing.
Or not. That's maybe.
Well, view options. Do you want me to do it?
Can you?
Apparently. We all learn new things. I've never done that before. Right.
So you got my ugly mug and shop it then, have you?
Yeah, we got your ugly mug in.
Good.
I have another couple of questions from Jeff Godin. I have to run with tighter curves on my layout. For your smaller locos, e.g. M7, can you suggest minimum radii?
So the M7 is certainly good, a little bit tighter than 6 foot, built according to the directions. Martin provides a number of different frame spacer widths, and he also provides a number of different ways of anchoring the bogie on the M7. If you use the narrowest frame spacers and try the different mounting points on the bogie, I suspect you can get it down a little bit under 6 foot. The challenge with a loco like the M7 is that the bogie wheels are adjacent to the frame, they don't pass through the frame. So to an extent, you're reliant on the ability of the bogie to turn before it hits the frame, but there is some allowance for that in the kit.
Can I just come in on this one? I've just had an M7 through my workshop for a customer who has to get it round 5 foot curves. And given the length of the wheelbase of the M7 and the proximity of the wheels to the frames, that is most certainly a challenge. And my solution was actually to cut arches in the frames, which of course is entirely unprototypical, and then back them so that you can't see daylight through. And I was able to get it fairly easily round 5 foot, but not without alterations to the rear of the frames. And having said that, I started off with probably the widest spaces because I was given a very well built completed model to sort out, so I didn't have any choice about which spaces to use. I'd be hesitant about using very narrow spaces because I think it would look silly, to be honest. So it is possible to get it round tighter curves. That's quite a difficult example.
I have a comment here from Glyn saying, Martin Finney told me that he would have produced a castle kit, but was beaten to it by Mr. Mitchell.
Okay.
The hall bogie is common to the castle bogie in size, but not the means of taking the weight to the frame. It's inside on the hall and outside on the castle.
Yes, it is.
I hope this is useful. Yeah, so there's a couple of bearings on the outside of the
yes.
castle bogie.
I think my suggestion would be that you approach a manufacturer of a castle and see whether they can make available their bogey. I seem to remember that just like the real thing did a super detailing kit for the bogey, which was very largely cast. So they may well be able to provide a mostly cast castle bogey.
Yeah, that sounds great. Brilliant. Okay, gentlemen, we're out of questions at the moment. If you would like to talk about something.
Well, again, Steph was interrupted talking about the chassis innovations on the 94XX.
Yes, I do apologise for that. Yeah, carry on.
Oh, it's all right. We'll take the questions in preference.
Well, I thought so, yes.
So we've got the 9400 actually is something which we're very pleased with. We've got the chassis is a little bit unusual in terms of the approach to building it and getting it together. One of the things that we have managed to do with it is that we've built it up as a compensated chassis, and it's self-aligning, so you don't need axle jigs to build it. The way that the chassis goes together will ensure the alignment of the coupling rods and axles. What that does, of course, for somebody who may be relatively new to building in the scale, is it allows the wheels to drop in and out, allows the transmission to drop in and out. As you've seen, we're providing a weighted set of mouldings. That's getting the weight in the right place. We're then in the situation where you've got that nice big hollow boiler available, so that if you want to fit DCC sound, you've got the opportunity for a nice big chamber behind your speaker to get some decent sound out of it as well. It's going to be quite an interesting model. I think people are going to enjoy building it. I know Simon, who's done the design work, has enjoyed doing the design work on it and doing the research for it. And yeah, so looking to get that out certainly by the end of the year. Really looking forward to seeing another of the Finney7 new kits out in the market.
Indeed. Question from Simon Stanford. Is there any show discount on loco orders placed today?
We don't tend to have discounts on loco orders, though I guess we'd be quite happy to do free postage on the basis if it was a show you'd have picked it up for nothing. So
Good to everyone. Is there any plans to extend the range of the LNE? So he's what?
I'll just finish this one. So if you do want to order something, a loco kit today, then we'll do your free postage on it. But other than that, we can't really do anything, to be honest. What was that extra question that was?
Sorry, what's that? Can the person who posed that question ask again, please? It was very quiet.
Person was me. I was wanting to ask Richard and Steph, is there any plans to extend the range of LNER BR Pacific kits to say the A1 or the A2 and other associated derivatives in that particular area?
It's been discussed, and we wouldn't actually necessarily say no, but it's not on the list that says we start this immediately, the B1 gets off the blocks. We have to have a meeting to discuss what we then want to do. That is certainly in the mix. I'm presuming you mean the peppercorn.
Yes, I do, yeah. And maybe any of the derivatives that come out of that, but there again, you're talking to completely different locomotives anyway.
Yeah. So it's been mooted. It's not been discussed as this is what we do next. But I wouldn't say never on that. It depends on what our designers feel like, what side of bed they get out of, really. I mean, we're more firmed up on the LSWR, to be honest, because we've got a path forward on that one, and the other regions other railways are not quite so planned out.
I'm all in favour of the London and South Western being your priority. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, but you probably know what we're planning to do, James.
Nope, I deny it. I know nothing.
Give me, but I'll disagree on that one. Albeit I do like some of the London South Western locomotives, but being a man from the north of the north part of the country, you only do well. You do a few that interest me, like the A4, the A3, and the Duchess. But I've got those in abundance. It's the other bits and pieces I'm more interested in. Anyway, thanks for that, guys. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Ian. It's great. No further questions at the moment, if you would, gentlemen.
Okay, so London South Western stuff then, Richard?
Yep.
So the range at the moment includes a number of 440s, so we do wide and narrow cab T9s. We do an L11. We do some tenders to run with them, both the water cart and the six-wheel tender. Anybody who's interested in the London South Western stuff and isn't familiar with the six-wheel tender, is that the Drummond six-wheel tender does both 13 and 14 foot wheelbase. Also got, of course, got the M7, and we also have T3 and tender, if you're interested in Adams locos, and two variants of the Adams radial, one of which is the standard S-built version, and the other one is the version that received Drummond boiler. So if you're modelling them in the BR era and you want all three, at least one of those locos will have a Drummond boiler. Where we go from here, those of you who are familiar with the stand will know that there is a larger 440 has appeared on the stand. So at the moment we're working on an L12, which is what that loco is. Martin prepared the original artwork for that to do the loco in London South Western condition. My challenge is to update that artwork to include the loco in later, including BR conditions, and to make sure we do the appropriate tenders for them as well. One of the things that my research over the last 18 months has drawn out is that the tenders that ran with the L12s, particularly when they were running with water cart tenders, were somewhat different, and we've got those parts in hand as well. Where we go after that is open to a little bit of debate. We've got a significant amount of research building up on a very, very much larger, very, very, very much later London South Western loco, which we would hope to be doing within a year or two. And there's also the option to do other Adams and Drummond locos within those timescales, I would have said. One of the things which is an opportunity with having most of the kits back out and available again is that my time can move slightly from doing productionisation into doing more design work and hopefully bring more London South Western locos to the fore. Is that fair, Richard?
Yes, it's quite a surprise in that when we actually had shows, there was always great interest in where the LSWR range went. I mean, of course, we've got the queries as to when you're getting the Great Western stuff out, but to my mind, there was a surprising amount of interest in the LSWR, which encourages us to go sort of further forward with those locos. I know it's sort of Steph scratching a personal itch to an extent, but it has actually been great fun as well. For example, for myself, being exposed to a whole different range of models and prototypes about which I knew very little indeed before getting involved with Finney7. So yeah, we frequently have the phone call where I'm going to Steph, what does this do? What does this like? What period did this bit appear on the loco? And he's been very patiently answering all my questions as I've been building the L12. which it's been quite exciting to do something that hasn't previously been available and for which there are no instructions. So building a Finney7 kit without instructions has been a fair challenge.
It's a fair observation. To be honest with you, Richard, most of the questions I get from you start with, what colour is the?
Yes. Yeah. That's when I'm doing commission builds and I don't do any painting. It all goes off to other painters, and we try and write a specification with eventually a view to putting it on a website to say this is our interpretation. And we've got a very good one for the Adams radar, which we haven't actually done anything with. But the idea is we can provide a very, very detailed paint spec eventually for the locos, so that there's a resource there for people building the models.
We can, of course, it's also worth adding that we can, of course, provide information of that nature to anyone who requests it. It's also fair to say that we will, we support the builder. So if there are issues, Richard has alluded to already, if somebody has had a problem with a kit, we will do what we can to provide them with parts, support and advice to ensure that the kit goes together for that individual. We also, many of you guys will be aware, we've got updated, illustrated instructions. They are, having got them out once, they are now in the process of going through part of a revision. So we will aim to continually keep them updated with what our knowledge is and the feedback that we receive. So certainly if you've got, if you find that that you're building one of our kits and that you've got something that requires some clarification, or you need some more advice, by all means get in contact. Of course, that's the advantage that we've got with these sorts of events, and it's the sort of thing that was always really good at shows, was that, and it's happened once or twice, that people have come to the stand with models that they want some help to move them on to the next stage. Of course, we're very, very happy to provide it. We're now in the situation where we've actually built the vast majority of the kits in the range. We actually know what they do, and we know the way that they work. So we're able to support them in the way that we would want to be supported if we were consumers of them as well.
I pick up on that. Steph's right, people do come up to us and say, I don't understand this, or can you please clarify that? All of us are online in one form or another, and there are plenty of builds which we get involved in either as the builder or people who comment on it online. So there's a resource there for people who are building our kits to be able to see how other people have managed, what pictures they provide, how they've tailored them to suit their own requirements. And I know people have found that very useful if they're a bit unsure of what is going to be a relatively expensive investment, to be able to look at our instructions, talk to us, and then be able to see a build online is very, very good, either to give them the encouragement that they can do it, or for them to say, no, it's not for me, because we don't want to sell a kit to somebody who can't do it, maybe starts tapping away at a computer and saying these kits are rubbish because they don't go together or whatever. So that's been very useful. Also, and this has been very nice, people have come to us with a picture of the locos they've built, so we're going to be able to build a gallery customer built locos. And the other thing is, regarding instructions, we only ever print enough for the kits we've immediately got ready to box, so that if somebody then comes up to us and says, I think you could clarify how this goes together by saying this or whatever, or I didn't understand this bit, we then revisit those instructions, and there's about 2 or 3 of us who do that, to then think, can we make our instructions better? And if necessary, we amend them, and the next batch out will have those amendments in. So that's the instructions are an organic process of growing from feedback both within and without the organisation, and that's really helpful.
I have a question here from Glyn. As you produce both the straight frame Bulldog and the Duke, would you consider a marriage to make a Duke dog?
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, the dear old Duke dog.
So the invitation is to buy both kits and snap one together.
Spoken like a true accountant, Richard. I'm now going to speak like a true engineer. It's not as simple as it looks, guys. The challenge, I understand, is that the boiler centre line heights are different. So we can't actually just cut and paste bits and pieces across. We also have, particularly in the case of the Bulldog is one of Martin's earlier kits. And it is, although it was drafted using CAD, as all the kits were, the challenge is that the tooling for that kit is analog, and so we would have to digitize it and then bring the two together and then carry out the adjustments for it. It sounds really simple, but in practice it means it's a new kit. As with a couple of other things discussed today, it is something that's on the list. There's a couple of people in the team who are very interested in it as a prototype. I can't say it's likely to happen anytime soon.
Thank you for that. Of course, there is the prototype down on the Bluebell.
Absolutely.
So,
other interesting stock on the Bluebell as well.
Yeah. Now, I've had the pleasure of driving it. So, yes. I went down to Clive Groom's course and spent a week shuffling a brake van along the platform. We didn't intend to. We were supposed to stop before we hit it. After 8 of us had buffered up to this brake van, it had moved 16 feet. Very interested.
Oh, wonderful. I think I'll stick with them in miniature, to be honest with you.
We can do the same with the miniature ones as well.
But it's easier. You haven't got brakes on those.
Yes. Right. That was the last question for the moment. Has anybody else got some questions for Steph or Richard?
Are people comfortable with those answers, by the way?
So far, yes. I've not had any particular. Well, there have been various comments saying, thank you for the reply and great, nice to hear. That was on the about the B1. So, and Ian's comment about the BT well tank, you saying not really, shame.
It is a lovely prototype, and I'm sure people, and I would build it just for the hell of having such a lovely model without having anywhere to run it or whatever. It's it's one of those small, tidy, characterful models. So I think it would be popular, but it's as Steph says, there are logistic issues unless you're going to say I'm building this one in BR days, and that's all the kit does, which rather limits it.
Well, that's probably not unreasonable. I mean, there's a 4mm ready-to-run model of the BT well tank. It was produced by one of the shops. I can't remember which one. It might be Kerno models.
It is Kerno, yeah, I've got a couple.
Right. So they must have chosen one particular era or one particular locomotive to copy.
Yeah, it's the one particular loco copy thing which gets interesting on the last three, because amongst those last three there are 2 different splasher and cap styles and 2 different frame lengths. So we would choose which one of those 3 we were going to produce a kit for. Otherwise, the builder has got enough parts in the box to build 2 locos, one of which existed and the other one of which didn't. So it's as I say, it would be a real challenge for an organisation like ours to try and produce a kit of it. I think because we would want to do it in a way which gave that fidelity, and we would want to do the research in order to to do that effectively. So it's genuinely in the just too difficult pile at the moment, which is a shame. As Richard says, I think it would be a popular prototype, but it would be difficult for us to do as a commercial venture, I think.
Right. If you want a prototype that I'd be interested in, there's two. They're London and South Western locos,
Go on.
the H16 and the G16. Now,
That's an interesting choice.
they're very similar. They have the same boiler, same cylinders. One just got an extra set of driving wheels. So, I mean, you could knock it up in no time at all, I'm sure.
I think that's quite an interesting prototype. I would also note that various other parts of the locomotive are shared with other locomotives by the same designer.
Yes. Yes. So there is some commonality there.
Yeah. And after the last one of these chats, actually, we have an order, I believe, for one of those. Somebody speculatively went, "Are you doing a?" and sent Richard an order for it. And
Really?
I've only just started the design work for it, so
Wow.
quite interesting.
Okay.
So if you want to have a guess on what the next London South Western loco is going to be, Richard will take an order for it now. And it isn't the BT Well tank.
Yeah.
Okay, no more secrets. I'll yes.
Yeah. But it's
Can I ask a question, James?
Yes, indeed.
How's the Aberdare going? It might have already been covered because I didn't join until recently.
The Aberdare is the problem child, as you're probably aware. The chassis, as Martin had it in the kit originally, required a degree of scratch building in order to complete it, which we're not 100% comfortable with as in terms of it fitting with the rest of the range. So we are in the process, not entirely sure where we are in the process, but we are in the process of designing a new chassis for the kit. We're certainly intending to bring it out. Thinking about where we are with the other things which we're working on, I suspect it's not this year, but definitely something we're looking to do. Much the same situation with the 2800 actually. One of the things that we did when we were looking to bring the 2800 out was we did a straw poll of a number of builders of them, and again came to the decision that probably it needed a new chassis to bring it up to the standard of the other kits in the range. So both of those are work in process, but they're not. Neither of them are particularly simple prototypes to work on.
The chassis of the Aberdare is interesting in that there is a kink in the mainframe between the middle and rear drivers, which means we have to be able to make that exactly reproducible so that any builder can be guaranteed to get all the axles in alignment. And the Aberdare was actually Martin's first kit, which he produced as an etchings-only kit initially. So obviously his design philosophy and work just improved enormously over that time. So the chassis is really very weak in the Aberdare, and there are complications in it that mean it's quite difficult to be able to be certain that it can be built in a repeatable fashion by everybody. And we think we're there, and a substantial amount of the design work and drawing has already been done. But then the debate we now have is what we do with the rest of the chassis, because it's possible to do a super duper all singing, all dancing chassis with loads and loads of extra castings and all the rest of it. So how far we want to go is a debate that we have to have. I mean, whatever we do will be good, but there's a danger of trying to do too much with the chassis. It will then mean that the rest of the loco isn't at the same sort of standard, which might be a bit of a mismatch.
Okay.
It's just something that's being actively worked on. The problem we've all had is getting all the range out that we inherited. I mean, when you think about the number of locos and tenders, there's close on 40 items, 45 items. All have had to have new moulds made and instructions drawn, things like that. So that's been a horrendous task, and I'm very convinced that things will start speeding up in terms of development work, new design work, once we can finally rubber stamp all of those and say, yeah, we know what we're doing, let's get on with the next stuff. And it's just been an unbelievable amount of time trying to get the Great Western Range sorted.
I think, Kevin, you might have missed Richard and Steph talking about the 94XX that they're bringing out this year, or hoping to bring out this year. And I know you're desperate.
Yes, I joined after that.
You're desperate to build another 94XX, aren't you, Kevin?
This is the
I haven't built one. I've only built a 1500.
Oh, right.
The production casting for the boiler firebox side tanks.
Looks like a fancy detergent bottle, doesn't it?
Thank you very much. I'll just hurt you with it.
You buy fancier detergent than I do, Kevin.
Say again?
You buy fancier detergent than I do, Kevin.
Well, we go to the shop and refill the bottle, so I can use the body for that. Really, I just got to find a spout go on the boiler.
We can provide you with a super detailed spout if you like. It doubles the cost of it.
Well, I've no doubt the 94 will go together better than the 1500 that I've just completed, and I'm on Xanax and therapy.
Yeah, we're putting a lot of time and effort into making sure that it does go together well. We're sort of on. It's at the light at the end of the tunnel stage. It doesn't mean it's for a release imminently, but we know where we're going on it.
It'll be this year, though, yeah.
We hope so, yes. I mean, there's a reasonable expectation that both the B1 and the 94XX will be out this year.
Well, good. I've got some wheels for the B1, so crack on.
Good. I've got some very nice nameplates, but that's probably the easier bit. Now, I would remind you, of course, that if anybody wants to, the group standard, we're not doing a new tender for it, so if you do want a B1, the group standard tender is available, and we've ordered some in nickel silver as well. So if you want a nickel silver tender to match the B1, then that's available at a slight premium, or will be when the etches arrive. So that can be done in advance of the B1, so you can have a sludge train of B1 tenders.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'll actually do that. Give me something to do. Excellent.
Drop me a line and we'll sort that.
Do we have any further questions from the audience? No. Anything we've missed that you'd like to talk about, Richard and Steph?
I think we've covered most of the things, to be honest. I mean, the loss of the shows in general has not been very helpful, because we've missed the feedback with people. Sure, some people email, some people phone, but that's not quite the same thing as the large number of people that come up to us at shows, to ask on progress, to give us feedback. So, and it's been very difficult for us as a group as well, because the 6 of us are geographically spread. So we haven't actually physically met either, which makes running a business a little bit trickier than it would in normal circumstances. So, although we communicate well, we do have defined roles, and we have missed the feedback of not actually being able to think of something, talk to a partner and maybe resolve it or go down a different avenue. See, a lot of the extra bits and pieces for the Bullied Light Pacific came about from either us thinking we can do that, or people talking to us to say, what about the wheels? And then we think, well, maybe we can just do an overlay for the wheels, and hence that came out. So that's made it a rather difficult year. Although, as with other manufacturers, people have still been looking to buy to do something in lockdown. So, you know, we've kept on going, kept on developing, and managed quite okay, thank you.
Yeah, it certainly has been a difficult year for everybody, but I don't know about everybody else in the meeting, but I've certainly finished a lot of things off this year. Quite a bit of which I had started many years ago.
Yes. I mean, we're hoping that we can get to the Gildex, you know, assuming we're all vaccinated and able to go to it. It seems a reasonable possibility that that might go ahead, but and it'd be good. You know, shows like that always give you a push to try and get things out, or you know, be at least the stage where you can take orders for delivery after it. I won't say that's been a lack of incentive, but it hasn't provided the impetus that the focus of the shows always provides in any year. Hoping you all get back to that.
That's very true. Can I just, as a matter of interest, Richard's just talking about Stafford, our next show. Can I just have a show of hands as to who would be happy to come along, given that we're probably all of an age where we need 2 vaccinations to make ourselves a bit safer. Yeah. Okay, me. Obviously, you, Richard.
Steph's probably far too young to have had any vaccinations. Yeah.
Okay, good. No, that's great. Thank you.
It's a straw poll. That's quite encouraging, actually, isn't it?
Yes, it's something that you know, on the committee we're obviously concerned about in terms of, you know, do we put a show on? If we do, will people actually come along to it? And of course, we need to commit to certain expenditure well before the event itself. So from that point of view, we've you know, we are at the moment fairly confident that September will be a date that the show could go ahead in terms of the government guidelines. But you know, we've got to be careful with the guild money, spending that and making sure that a reasonable number of people would want to come.
James, of the 5,500 members, or whatever it is, how many do you have email addresses for? And can you do a straw poll via email to validate what your thinking actually is about the show?
Yes, we have, I think, around 4,000. Jeff, can you comment on this? I think you've got the better figures. Do we have about 4,000 email addresses? You're on mute, Jeff, by the way. Jeff, you're on mute. I can't unmute you.
Yeah, we got currently we've got about 5,700 members, but of course not all those have got email addresses. It's north of 4,000 email addresses, possibly as many as 4,500. Yeah.
It's got to be worth a bash then, just to get some feedback.
Yeah.
Maybe not yet. Maybe in when you're in the middle of August or something, or early August.
We need to have committed to quite a lot by the middle of August. Maybe a bit late.
We'd need.
Okay. When would you have to do it?
Probably by Easter, I would imagine.
I suspect you could you probably could go as far as June, early June.
Really?
I suspect.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, it's issues not just of booking the show space, but also starting to book hotels reservations and things. And probably 3 months out. That sort of thing comes in, and then you've got ancillary things like catering and other support services. It would be well before August. We'd need to know.
Yeah. I think there's been a bit of a sea change in the use of technology in lockdown, even by the older generations. So, you know, they may be more used and more receptive to using even some of the more advanced forms of communication. I don't suppose they're all going to Zoom, but email or text or something.
Yeah, we will be using those mechanisms to check this. But I think I speak for a lot of people in that, you know, I'd love to go to a show. You know, that'd be great. Sort of get out and actually go somewhere. Okay, we have, oh, a minute. No, we don't have any further questions. We've now reached the end of our hour. So can I thank, I presume, yeah, I think that's it. Can I thank our hosts, Richard Lambert and Steph Dale, for talking to us today and for telling us about their plans for Finney7. Thank you, everybody. And I'll be terminating the meeting. Enjoy the rest of the show today.
Okay, thanks, James.
Bye-bye.
Carry on.